Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Book Talk with Kara. Today, it is such a treat to be able to introduce you to my friend Susan Meissner. And if you've already read her books, which I'm sure so many of you have, then you will be delighted just to get to know her and learn more about Suze and her books. Suze, we have known each other for almost 20 years, which is crazy. But I have to say, before we dive into this brand new book, that one of your books is one of the few that I have had the experience of going, oh my gosh, I wish I had written that book. And I read voraciously. I love books, but there have only been a few times where I have literally been reading a book and turned to my husband or one of my daughters and been like, this is a book I truly wish I would have written. I'm blown away. And I think it was The Girl in the Glass or The Girl in the Mirror or something like that. It was the
Uh-huh.
one set in Italy.
Yes.
And I still remember reading that one and just being like, oh my gosh, the storytelling's amazing. The characters are incredible. I think it was one of your first dual time, maybe. And there was just something about it that was so compelling. And I already loved you and I loved your books, but ever since then, I've just been like this super fan. So it's so much fun to have you here today.
Oh my goodness, thank you so much. I had no idea that book resonated with you. So that is wonderful. That's
Yeah, and it's one of those that's book was probably 10, 15 years ago
yes,
now.
I'm thinking it was. It was actually more than 10, probably like a dozen years
Yeah.
ago.
Yeah, and isn't that funny how, I mean, all of your books are great. I enjoy every single one that I've read. And often you find these really interesting moments in history,
Mm.
and some of them are dual time, some of them are one moment in time. But you find these moments and then you spin out this story. But there was something about that one that just
Mm.
really resonated with me. And
Well, when
so,
I wrote that book, I wanted people who had not been to Florence to feel like they had been. And for those who had been and fell in love, as one does, if you're
oh,
able to get to
absolutely.
Florence, that they would feel like I just went back and I had a great time.
And it does. I mean, you're definitely transported as someone who's been to Florence several times now. And at that time, I think I it was still aspirational. I think it was about the time I was writing Shadowed by Grace or dreaming up Shadowed by Grace. And I was like, oh my gosh, I love this story so much. And Italy was still so aspirational for me. But yeah, I mean, it was like I was so fully transported. And then when I did get to Italy, I was like, oh my gosh, I've already been here because I've read Suze's book. And it was just so incredible. So, how did you get into writing? Because this is something that you write these amazing books, and each one is unique. When I write historical, I write World War II because I'm like, there is so much research and so much work that goes into it. I am embedding
Right.
myself in one time period. You don't do that. You don't limit yourself. You just kind of you pick the story, the moment that grabs you. So, how did you get into this journey?
Yeah, I have always loved to write. I'm one of those people that it's always been an itch that just had to be scratched. My mom tells me I was making up poems in the back seat of the car when I was 4. So that was even before I really knew how to write. And I can't remember a time when I didn't feel compelled to write down stories and poems. And I have some of my early stuff, like the stuff that I wrote when I was 7 and 8. Oh my gosh, they're so terrible. But what it was this, I think it's just a gift that I've been given and I'm grateful for it. And I think it was just I was realizing there was something there and I was meant to do something with it. And so it was definitely something that had to be honed. I feel like I had like an innate love and ability perhaps for writing, but it was something that had to be stretched and exercised. And I'm really glad that I figured that out. And then over the course of my life, I've had people affirm that for me. Like I had a teacher in high school. He was so instrumental in helping me realize that this wasn't just a hobby for me, and it wasn't just something that I could do. Like some people are good bakers and good writers and good this and there are many things that they're gifted at, but he really believed this was something that I was meant to do with my life. And he and I actually stayed in touch after high school. He just died last year. He was 96 years old, and we stayed in touch post high school. We've been friends for like I don't know 50 years, and
Wow.
I count him among a very small group of people who had like a huge impact on my writing life. And so I salute teachers everywhere who have that kind of impact on their students. If you're a teacher and you're listening, you are amazing, and I salute you. And I didn't do something with my writing in my 20s. I still didn't quite believe that I had something that the world needed. And so
Yeah.
I didn't do a lot of writing in my 20s, but in my 30s, the kids, we have 4 children. The 3 of our 4 children were in school, and I found that I just had some extra time, and there was an opening for a part-time reporter in this little town we were living in. And I thought maybe the applicant pool would be a little shallow because of where we were living. And I got the job with absolutely no experience writing professionally. But I was able to convince the editor of that little newspaper that I had what he needed to get the job done. And it was so easy. It was writing obituaries and wedding announcements and school board minutes and all of that. And that was my 30s, but all along I was itching to write a novel, and I just didn't feel like I had the chops for it. And it wasn't until my 40s that I realized I have to give this a shot, or I'm always going to wonder, could
Yeah.
I have? It would have been a shoulda, woulda, coulda thing. And
Yeah.
so I finally, in my 40s, I was 42, I think, when I wrote my first novel, and Harvest House Publishers in Eugene, Oregon picked it up just on a whim almost, because I didn't know anybody and nobody knew me. I'm so glad they took a chance on me, because that was the beginning.
That's amazing, and, uh, that first series was a good one too, lawyers and, just the whole idea was so high concept, and then you made the switch to what you're writing now, which is more of
Mhm.
these historical with sometimes romance, a lot of women's fiction type of story, sometimes dual timelines, sometimes all set in one time period, and A Map in Paradise is the book that comes out this spring, and, one of the things that's really fun about this one is it's featured in People, which that doesn't happen very often. So
No,
congratulations.
thanks. That was a really nice surprise. And it's nice when you're affirmed by, I guess, your colleagues, and to have that book. Here's the cover is absolutely gorgeous. I just
It
love it so
is.
much. And I have nothing to do with the cover. I got this great artist at Berkeley who just knows me and gets my vibe. And it was just nice to see that book in People magazine, among other books that they think are books that should be read. Very, very grateful for that.
So tell us a little bit about A Map in Paradise, because you've set it in
Mhm,
1956 in
mhm,
Malibu, California.
mhm.
And so it's kind of this time period that sometimes can get lost. And it's also, we were talking about this a couple weeks ago when we were in Phoenix together, that it's a little hard to think of 1956 as historical, but it is historical now. And so the idea that it's kind of this time period that gets a little bit lost between World War II and Vietnam, but there was a lot going on. So why did you pick
Mhm.
1956?
Yeah, I picked it because we've had such a great amount of World War II books out this past decade. I mean, some really, really good
Yeah,
books that probably should have been written ages ago. And we just kind of discovered, oh my gosh, we need to be telling these stories before our eyewitnesses, fade. And so it got me to thinking, well, what are people wanting to read next? Like, if if they enjoyed all of those wonderful World War II books, are they wondering, well, what happened next? And I thought, I'm just going to look and see what happened next. And is there a story waiting there? And I think there is. I think there's more to be told about the 1950s. It was, it's post war. So you'd think it would be this idyllic time of peace and everybody wanting and willing and ready to be happy again. And it was. I mean, the 50s were a great decade. Best fashions, the best cars.
yeah. I totally agree on the fashion.
They had it. And everybody was afraid we were going to kill each other. And so it felt like everything that made us feel safe and secure, and the concept of home, it felt like it was in the balance. And one of us was going to be the aggressor, and the other would be its captive, and home would be destroyed. What we consider home, not our address, but where we feel like we
Yeah,
belong and where we feel safe. And I thought that's a pretty heady thought. And
yeah.
thematically, there was a lot there. And then I read, because I was reading about the Cold War and what it was like and the era of McCarthyism and the Red Scare, that there was a huge Red Scare in Hollywood, of all places,
Yeah.
which surprised me. It's Hollywood. But back then, Hollywood was the place where social commentary came to life. Now we have all these avenues and mediums and platforms for social commentary. You can't hardly get away from it. But back then, it was the studios. They were the ones who were giving us social commentary. And so Hollywood was seen as the place where communism could flourish if the writers and directors and actors wanted it to. They could do it. They could be subversive, and they could start to infiltrate and put out messaging that people wouldn't even know they were being like dragged in to communism. And so there was a gigantic witch hunt for communists in Hollywood that really interested me. And the other thing that interested me about the 50s was the millions of displaced people. After World War II, there were 11 million people displaced by the war. 11 million. It was Holocaust survivors and prisoners of war and forced laborers and political activists, political refugees. There were a lot of people. And the United States took in about 400,000 DPs, displaced people there were 800 DP camps at one time in Germany alone. And we brought in 400,000 of them under a special quota. And so one of those people is in my book. She's made up, but she's representative of any number of refugees from the war. She's Eastern European. She's Russian, pretending to be Polish, because that wasn't good to be from Russia in the United States. And so she's got a secret. I've got a blacklisted actress who doesn't even know what a communist thinks because she wasn't paying attention in high school, but she's been labeled guilty by association because she knows somebody who probably is. And then they are living next door to a woman who's taking care of her agoraphobic brother-in-law. He's a screenwriter who never leaves his house. And she's a widow. She was married to his brother. She's secretly in love with him. He doesn't have the same feelings for her. But that's not her biggest problem. Her biggest problem is if he dies, she has nothing, absolutely nothing. So these three women they've either lost everything, which is what my DP, she lost everybody and everything she loved in the war. She's lost it all. So they've either lost it, are losing it, like Melanie, the actress. She's losing everything she's ever wanted, or it's gonna be lost. And that's all they have in common, is this displacement. It's either happening or it's going to happen. And yet they become allies to each other because they all have secrets. And a novel, especially if there are secrets, they're meant to be found out and to cause trouble. Trouble will ensue. And so they begin to form this alliance with each other to help each other. It's an unlikely friendship.
Well, and that's what I love. You've got all these different people and these layers, and they're all coming together, and it's going to be twisty and it's going to be fun. And it's a Susan Meissner novel. It's so much fun. So when you're thinking about it, one of the things I always find curious when I'm talking with authors like you is which comes first? Was it one of the characters that just popped into your head? Was it the time period? Because sometimes, I mean, and sometimes it's book by book. Sometimes you're like, nope, I always start with this part of the process. For me, sometimes it depends on, I'm going to be in this genre, I'm going to be in that genre. So I'm just curious, like for a book like this, A Map in Paradise, which one came first for you?
Yeah, for me, it's almost always the event. Because I don't know why, but I do love history. I think I probably should have majored in it in college. I think I would have really enjoyed that, but I didn't know that I was kind of hooked on it. I like what history shows us. It shows us what we care about, especially what we care about parentally, like what matters to us, no matter what the time period, what stays with us. It travels with us through time. And some of the bigger things, like love and acceptance and justice and all of those really big ones, they're timeless. And history shows us our mistakes too, which is one reason why we need to remember our history, is because our mistakes are there and our lessons are there. And we don't want to forget what happened. And so for all those reasons, history moves me. So with this, I started looking into the Cold War and what it meant to be just a normal human being living in that era. And when I found out that there were communists or suspected communists and then a witch hunt in Hollywood, in Hollywood, not higher education, but Hollywood. That just surprised me. And it interested me because it's like, it's Hollywood. It's a dream factory. It's Tinseltown. It's not real. But so all of that interested me. And then the amount of displaced people, all these DPs, the humanitarian crisis that was the displaced persons event, that interested me. And they have nothing to do with each other. But I wanted to marry them in a novel because they interested me and I wanted to study about them. And so I
Yeah.
had to find a way to have a DP and a blacklisted actress. And I wanted to round it out with a third character who would kind of show what it's like to have imminent loss rather than at the moment loss or lost in the past.
Well, and that's where being neighbors, you can put all those things together and be like, okay, so here's how they're going to work it all out. I love that. So when you think about this book, sometimes when we're writing, everything just flows perfectly and it works from beginning to end, and we don't have to go through massive edits. And other times when we're writing and we think it's beautiful, and then we get like two-thirds of the way through the book and we're like, oh yeah, that doesn't work like I thought it would when I get to this point. Or our amazing editors are like, yeah, that didn't work like you thought it would. You're going to have to like pull the whole thing apart or rework something. So is there a way that, without giving us spoilers, that A Map in Paradise changed from when you started to what readers are going to see?
This was a really hard book to write. It was so tough. And
Yeah.
I cried over this book. And
Oh,
yeah, because I felt like I was losing my edge. I had fallen out of my groove. I was a hack. And I
that means
wrote
it's
the
going to
book.
be amazing.
Well, I hope so. I really like it now, but there were times where I didn't even like the book anymore. And what it was is I decided I was going to write the whole thing and not show any of it to my editor or my agent. I just wanted creative freedom to write the book, and I was going to do a really good job. I had told myself I'm going to edit the heck out of this thing, and I'm going to make sure when I turn it in, it's darn near perfect. And my mom read it, and she's actually she's very objective when she reads my stuff. And I said, tell me if there's anything about it you don't like. And she gave it back to me and said, no, it's great. Turn it in. And I turned it in, and both my editor and agent said, we like it. And they said, but, and they're like, think you can do more. We think you can make it more. We think you can make it more mysterious. We think you can not give away so much. We think you can hide some things and hedge some things and make it more of a mystery. And I know why they wanted mystery. Mysteries sell really well. And they
Mhm.
wanted something that was really easier to market rather than this book that kind of wants to be literary fiction but isn't quite there. And so they wanted me to have another go at it. And I had to rewrite some key scenes and keep them hidden. Like one scene that I had really close to the front, I had to hide until page 200. So all of that was just very frustrating to me. And I would,
Yeah.
I would write a new scene and I wouldn't like it, and I would have to rewrite it again. And I was feeling very frustrated. I knew that we all wanted the same thing. We all wanted a really good book that people would enjoy. And so that kept me going. And I trusted my agent and my editor. I do trust them. So I thought I have to believe that what they're asking me to do is what this book needs. And it took probably, I don't know how many efforts, but it was one of these books that I rewrote like a certain chapter 10 times, 10 different
Oh,
ways.
wow.
And when you have a book with 45 chapters, it's like that's just a lot of rewriting. I don't even know how many thousands of words ended up on the cutting room floor. But in the end, it's a book we all like. Everybody likes it. We all feel like it's been delivered to the reader in its best way. Like nothing really changed. It was just the way I
Yeah.
was telling it. And now it's its best iteration, if you will. So it was not a process that I enjoyed. I never want to write a book like that again. Even though I love the book, that's not the way I want to write a book. So now I'm trying to be more, like the one I'm writing now, I'm thinking, what are my editor and agent going to think about this? so that when I
Mhm.
turn this one in, they'll say, you really thought about what we would like, or you really thought about what the market wants, because it really is about what the market wants.
Yeah.
I'm not going to have dragons in my book. I'm not going to have certain market things that are really hot right now. And so I do have to find out, well, what do people do want that has nothing to do with dragons or rom-com or, you know, the kind of book that has like the cute cartoon
Yeah.
cover. You're really hot right now. Well, I don't write that. And I don't write dragons, but what do people like that I do write? And I do have to dial into that because the reader and we need to meet. We have to meet each
Yeah.
other. And my editor and my agent are there to help me make sure that people who want to read what I write, that we do find each other.
Well, and I think that's important though to know you're not going to throw a dragon in there. Like that would be not a Susie Meissner book. It would not be a Kara Putman book, but I can direct you to people who write that kind of
Oh,
stuff. But
yeah.
it's not going to be me because I don't even like reading that stuff. I don't like watching those movies. It's just not me.
Yeah.
But knowing what readers want and what they expect, and knowing how to deliver that while being true to our voice and our characters and our
Mhm.
type of book is really important. But I'm sitting here listening to you going, okay, you rewrote a chapter 10 times. If you saved all those versions, that would be a fascinating like gift to subscribers of your newsletter, the evolution of a chapter, or a great writers conference workshop. Like, here's
Oh,
why it kept
right. Yeah.
changing, you know, here's why this one didn't quite work or why this one wasn't quite enough. Um, because sometimes it's hard to know,
Mhm.
like when is it good enough? When do we stop?
That was the hardest part about it was I kept second guessing myself, because I didn't feel confident. I lost confidence in my ability to
Yeah.
tell a story. You would think that as you write, the more you write, the more comfortable you get with your craft. And like a good swimmer who
Yeah.
can't swim a mile when they first start swimming, well, if they keep at it long enough, they'll be able to swim that mile and they'll be great at it. Well, this is not like that. It's like it's never the same mile.
No,
You start a new book and it's not the same mile. You're swimming something totally different. And I appreciate that now, but when you're in it, when you're trying to pull off what you've already pulled off 25 times already, why is this so hard? And that part really shook me, and I had to say it's okay. It is
yeah,
okay to have kind of a shift in the market. Sometimes makes you shift, and it's okay to realize what I was writing 10 years ago, I need to do something different now. It's different now. And so it's paying attention and being ready and willing to step up your game or do something totally different or head down a parallel path that you never thought you would take. No dragons. But it might mean just lending
yeah,
itself more to mystery. Like, if I hadn't thought about what could I make more mysterious, rather than thinking, well, I don't write mysteries. It's like, well, no, if that's what the market wants, how can I give the reader what they want and still be me?
exactly. And I think that's the important piece, and still be me and still
Hmm.
do what I do. And so like for me, as I'm thinking about my next series, it's like, okay, but I want to add a little more of this because writing
Hmm.
needs to be fun and enjoyable, but every book gets harder because
Yeah.
every book I feel like I've made like my next book that I write will be book 45, I think, or 46 or something like that. And
Wow.
like I have 45 promises that I've made to writers. And
Yeah.
so it's like the next one, I can't just be, oh, well, Kara already wrote this book. It's
Right.
just she's just changed the names or she's changed the
Yes.
setting.
And that
And
does
so
get difficult because you've used up a lot of your good ideas, you know,
yeah,
and your good
it's
words.
and so it
There are
is.
only so many words, and you've already used quite a lot of them, and in these different ways you describe a sunset. Well, you can't use
Yes.
something you used in book two.
Yeah,
It's got to be different.
exactly. I was just writing before we hopped on and I was like, how many different ways can you build up to a kiss? And I don't even like the romance. If I could just skip the romance, I'd be so happy. But again, readers want romance. So I'm
Mhm.
like, okay, fine, they have to kiss. It's about that point in a book. I'm like, how many different ways? And yet some people they do these amazing. I'm like, that's just not a Kara Putman book. I'm not
Yeah,
Susie
no.
Warren or Rachel Houck. This is how Kara Putman does it. But every book I can try to get better at it. And so it's just kind of funny, but there is that, Okay, but how do you say it differently and fresh? And that's what
Mhm.
makes writing fun too, is
It
just
does
trying.
make it fun, and it also keeps you kind of like on your toes. Like you
Yeah,
can't just rest on your laurels. You kind of have to kind of stay at it like you're still learning rather than being at the top of your game and being the teacher always. You're
yeah,
still the learner and you're still kind of the apprentice. Like that part never stops. It just doesn't stop.
yeah. It's so true. And I always think the moment I think I've got it all figured out is when I need to be like, okay, and the keyboard goes away.
Yeah.
Because at that point, I am not in a place to actually write in a way that's going to serve readers.
Yeah.
Because I've just been like, okay, I'm dialing it in now. And Chat GPT can do that. What
Right.
I can do that nobody else can do is write a book that brings my creativity and my
Mhm.
perspective and my way of looking. Okay, so a couple of fun, light questions as we wrap up. Do you write to silence or with music?
Oh, nothing. There's nothing going on in my office when I'm writing. I don't even like to hear the dog barking outside. It's like I don't know why, because I don't think of myself as an easily distracted person, but it just doesn't help. Like I know some people like to have like a soundtrack from the era that they're writing as kind of like a helper to get them into that time and place, and I don't find it a help. And and so if it doesn't help me, then I don't want it. So every now and then, my husband, he's retired, he'll have a soundtrack on, and I'll hear it in the other room. And
Yeah.
as long as there's no words, I'm fine with it. But I don't want anything on in my office space. Nothing.
Yeah. It's usually I have something on, but the last few weeks I've had my earbuds in with nothing, which
Yeah,
is so weird for me. And then I'm
yeah.
like, okay, now I need the Marvel soundtrack. Now I need something, but it's just so funny. I've had my earbuds in, and that's not normal for me. Um, Coffee or tea, or something completely different to drink while you're writing.
Oh, I start out with coffee in the morning, but like right now, I have this cup of tea. And
Okay.
that's when I switch. I don't know why I segue to tea, but it's coffee in the morning and then tea in the late morning or early afternoon. And it's just always been that way. And maybe just because once you develop a habit, you just keep at it and there really
Yeah.
is no reason for it other than the fact that that's what you've always done. So it's always tea in
And
the
it
afternoon.
works.
And it works, right? Why mess with it?
Yeah.
It's working.
Do you have a special tea that you like?
I am kind of a snob, I guess, about
Yeah.
tea. So it's got to be good. Someone needs to put some thought into it. So I don't buy your usual grocery store teas. Um, so it's not like I have a favorite, but I like there are certain Celestial Seasonings has certain ones
Mhm.
that I like, and is it starts with a Y, Yogi or Yo? I'll think of
Oh,
it
like the
when we're
Yoshi or
done.
something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, it starts with a Y, and they're very clever teas. Trader Joe's has good teas, and
Mhm.
then I've been given some teas by is it Tea Forte? Does that sound right? I think
Yes.
it's called Tea Forte. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, they're delicious. Yes.
Yeah.
So if it's by Tea Forte, I will drink it.
But just not the Lipton. Dunk it and you're good.
No, no, no.
I like that. Okay, last one. Salty or sweet?
Oh,
Or both. Both is always a legitimate answer.
salty and sweet go so good together, and there aren't as many of those. So it
It's
narrows
true.
it narrows your options down a little bit. So I'm going to go with a hybrid of something salty
Yeah.
and sweet. I don't want it too sweet, and I don't want it too salty. But if it's just the right marriage between the two,
Yeah. Perfection, right? All right. Well, as we wrap up, Susan, where can people find you online to learn more about you and your books?
Sure. Well, my website is susanmeissnerauthor.com. And that's where you can just find out where I'm going to be, what I'm doing. You can sign up for my newsletter. I only send it out 6 times a year, and I try to keep it friendly. Like it's not all about me. I usually talk about what I'm reading. So if you want to know what kind of books I enjoy, I usually talk about 3 or 4 books that I've read and enjoyed. I'm also on Facebook, Susan Meissner. I think it's just Susan.Meissner is my author page. And on Instagram, there's Susan Meissner Author.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today. It's always so fun to connect with you.
Always a pleasure. I feel like I know I just saw you in Phoenix. I already feel like it's been too long. So, yeah, hope it happens again sometime soon.